This episode of Beyond the Tube, Real Stories, Real Advice is proudly brought to you by TubiFun. TubiFun are a fantastic company who endeavour to make tube feeding a little bit more fun for our Tubi kids and their families. Check out TubiFun on Instagram via the link in our show notes. Thanks again to TubiFun for sponsoring today's episode and for your continued support of the Tubi community. Today, we are joined by the wonderful Sam, the co-founder of the app called Heba. Heba's an interactive app available through the App Store, which you are absolutely going to love. I can't wait to unpack this one with him and show you all about it.
Sorry about that. I was having a bit of an issue connecting and getting my Wi-Fi sorted and these sorts of things. Very nice to meet you.
It's so lovely to meet you too. Thank you so much for doing this at such an early hour.
Totally my pleasure. Well, I also was feeling for you because I know I'm kind of between you and the weekend, so I thought I couldn't complain much.
No, that's good. I enjoy doing this, so it's a good thing for me.
Good. No, I was really looking forward to it. And, when we first started speaking a little while ago, always keen to just meet others in this space. So I was really looking forward to it.
Amazing. I'm the same. I just think your app is awesome. It's such a good resource. And if we can get more people onto it, I just think it could be so life-changing for so many people.
Well, I think that's the thing for us, which we really want to focus on is we've got something that when people use it, they find it really beneficial, which is really rewarding. But what's difficult and understandable is that it's quite hard to, get the word out there about it, but also then, help encourage people to trust it and where did it come from and why was it built? Was it built for families or was it just some kind of tech bros? And so hopefully by sharing a bit more about how we came to be doing it, that'd be great. And also huge credit to you for what you're building with Beyond the Tube as well. So I suppose we're both on this journey to kind of create a resource for families.
Definitely. There's just, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but here there's just so little information, not much support. People don't really understand what tube feeding is, why people do it, what the reasons are. They just assume that people who have a tube must have some sort of eating disorder, like anorexia or bulimia. Or they think that people who have it have like a terminal illness, like cancer or something like that, which is, all of that is true, but that's certainly not all that it encapsulates.
Yeah, I think that's a similar dynamic here in the UK. I suppose have pockets of knowledge and awareness, but often not beyond that pocket. And so anything that can be done to share a little bit more about the stories behind it, I think is hugely helpful. And then we've heard this sometimes with people in our community, but I think what you're doing with Beyond the Tube is exactly solving it, which is when you do encounter something like this personally for the first time, to make it clear that you're not the only person going through that, both for practical support, but the emotional support as much as anything else.
Absolutely. And just to know where to connect to get information. And it could just be simple information. We have doctors and we have specialists and we have, allied health professionals that we go to for specific things. But there's a whole lot of other supports out there that if you don't know where to go to get them, you just won't know that they exist, because I don't think necessarily our specialists, our doctors, our allied health supports are naturally flowing people through those avenues, i.e. your app. It would be so great if people were like, hey, do you know about this app? This would be so helpful. You know what I mean? Like, give it to people as a resource.
Yeah, and that's what we've been trying to do a bit in the UK here. So in the NHS and a few kind of private and charity led organizations to have HEAP is one of the things that maybe is mentioned to you at the point at which a diagnosis occurs, or maybe you're on a wait list for a diagnosis and say, oh, what could be helpful to you? Here's Heba, try it out. Might help you feel in control of these things, get access to resources, understand a little bit more, just so you're introduced to a tool like Heba or any other resource at the right time. Whereas I think often what happens today can be that these great resources exist, but you find out about them, for want of a better word, almost randomly, because you happen to be on Instagram at the right time and somebody reshared it, rather than because the clinician or professional said this will be useful now that you're at this point in that experience.
Absolutely. I think you often stumble across information by accident, not through someone referring it, which is both good and bad. Like, I see both sides of it. It's good when you find it yourself, but if you don't know where to look, how do you get that information? So that's what I'm trying to do with the podcast, is put it in one place. And I've just created, like, literally on Wednesday, a YouTube channel, because that's where my editor and producer thinks that will be a good way for this to kind of build and develop, is to actually have a centralized point on YouTube where people can go and watch things. And particularly as we start to go down the route of how to practically use these things. So, we've discussed with a speech therapist about actually showing what happens in a speech therapy session. What do they actually do? It's all good and well to talk about it, but actually do it. But I think we could do something similar with the app too, is actually demonstrate how to use it and have that as a resource, which I think would be brilliant.
Totally. And I think, for some people, like a digital tool comes quite naturally, but for a lot of people it doesn't, particularly when the status quo might have been lots of different Post-it notes and things that stuck and handwritten. And so we often spend time kind of one-to-one with users to help explain how this can be helpful. And I think you're exactly right. Things like YouTube, especially, you can actually see what's going on rather than kind of have it on in the background or read it. And I think it can be really powerful for that reason, whether it's how to use an app or whether it is actually what happens on the inside of one of these appointments.
I think the best point to start with, although we have already kind of touched on it, what is Heba? How did it start? Where did it come from? And why? Why did you create it?
Heba is a mobile app to help families to manage and coordinate and navigate the care of children with additional needs. And we launched the app publicly at the start of last year, the start of 2024. The concept for me had been something I've been working on for a few years. I professionally had a background working in healthcare, not on the clinical side of things, but in kind of NHS hospitals on management projects and looking at new healthcare innovation. But the reason I set it up more than anything was from personal experience. So I am calling you from London, grew up about an hour and a half south of London. And in the town that I grew up, my mum has spent her career as an occupational therapist working with individuals with quite complex learning disabilities and epilepsy. And so would see kind of after school some of the work she was doing in the care home where she works. Because of experiences related to that, and also experiences of family friends growing up with developmental disabilities such as cerebral palsy, when I moved to London, I started volunteering for a charity here that supports children at the weekend with a range of developmental differences, whether that be cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, autism, ADHD. What I was seeing was that every child was unique anyway. So really what was the important acknowledgement for me was that behind each child, there was a family at home who were managing and coordinating and navigating care. And they were working incredibly hard and diligently to do this. And they become the experts in their child's care with the support of professionals, but largely in a kind of self-driven way, working out how to navigate a system that is really overwhelming, and more could be done to support them on that journey. And I thought, well, I am often meeting families who've created their own systems of managing care, or created their own groups and networks to support one another. And increasingly parents are looking to kind of digital tools that at 2:00 in the morning they can use, or are used to kind of interfacing with digital tools that mean that they can share information really easily. And I thought, well, what about if we created something that was bespoke for these families, rather than like an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Docs or a WhatsApp group? Let's build something that's for families who are caring for individuals, to help them with keeping track of information, sharing that, understanding it as well, what might be causing what might be occurring when, and then get access to kind of trusted resources and signposting them to podcasts like this or healthcare services, and so on. I suppose it was probably the end of 2022. I met my co-founder, Uzai, who's a software engineer. We spent most of 2023 designing the app by talking to hundreds of families and care professionals, lots of support groups around London, going in and kind of asking, what could be useful to you in your day-to-day life, drawing kind of sketches of things that might be helpful, and then eventually bringing it to life. And since then, really been trying to stay close to users and getting their feedback. And we launched it in multiple countries from day one. So in Australia, the UK, the US, Canada, those are the main countries. And it's been really rewarding to see it being used in all of those countries, and have people from kind of Hawaii to East London sending in messages and helping us to try and improve it. And I think that's the thing I would emphasize off the bat is we know it can always improve, and we're still a very young organization, so we'd love to always get as much feedback as we can as possible to try and build something that really works.
Definitely. And as a user, I have the app, I have it myself. I couldn't fault it. I think it's fantastic. It's, to me, I think one of the highlights is being able to share the information with multiple people. So it's not just necessarily sharing it with medical providers, but if I'm not going to the appointment and my husband's going to the appointment or his support worker's going to the appointment, I can just share that information with them and they can then relay that information to whomever Ezra is going to see, which is amazing. It's better than taking a big chunky folder.
Well, that was the thing. I grew up, as I said, a little bit way out of London, and family friends of mine would kind of drive up to London appointments with a bootload of paper folders, all the information that they needed to take to their specialists. And I think the sharing of information was one of the key things that came up when we first started speaking to families. Constantly having to retell your story, for example, was a line that would come up. And so being able to make this a platform where you can have the important information and then really easily access it, but really easily share that. So you can, if it totally at the discretion of the primary user of the app, but let's say it's the mum who set it up, for example, you can choose to add somebody to the account as well within your care circle, we call it. So that might be your partner, or it might be maybe a care assistant in the home. So they have close access to the app. They can add things or just view them. But what we also allow you to do is, if you're meeting somebody for the first time, you can quite easily just export information to that person as a PDF. Again, totally at your discretion, but for example, we have a feature called the Care Passport. I'm not sure if that's a phrase that's used in Australia much, but in the UK, Care Passports today are recommended by the NHS for families who want to share a kind of summary of important information. That might be medications and diagnoses, but also might just be like, what is your child like? What makes them happy? How do they express when they're sad? It's a paper-based form today that you're probably unlikely to have on you at the time you need it. Maybe it's crumpled up at the bottom of a bag. You've used it once because you gave it out the last time you went to A&E. Whereas in Heba, one of the first things you can do is set up the Care Passport in as much detail as you want. And then just with 2 clicks, you go export as PDF, and then somebody can receive it in whatever form you want. Maybe you export it as an email or AirDrop, or just turn your phone around so that whenever you need somebody to learn a little bit of information, it's there for you. And we've heard that being used for users who have maybe just got a new babysitter, but also with paramedics in an emergency situation, they're asking what's the list of medications. So yeah, to your point, I think sharing, and I guess if we were to kind of jazz up the words a little bit, coordinating that care information is one of the things that we try and emphasize.
Definitely. And I think you do a great job of it. I think we would call it the Blue Book. At least in New South Wales, that's what we call our Care Passport. So when a baby is born, they're given a blue book, and it has all their information, all their weight, height, vaccination information, all their checks, everything. And yes, it's a little tiny blue folder that we carry around. So being able to put that information into Heba and have all of the additional information for a medically complex child, amazing. Life changing.
What we try and do as well is we make it as customizable as you can. So the Care Passport, we have a couple of like preset sections you might want to fill out, but lots of customizable ones as well. And I think one of the things that understandably sometimes parents will say when we introduce them to Heba is like, oh, it's an app. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with something that's digital. And the last thing we would be saying is, oh, we're building an app. We're building a digital tool for digital sake. What we'd like to think is that the app can be kind of complementary to a blue book. So you don't have to have the blue book on you the whole time, but there will be instances where actually having the blue book might be more useful. And I think that's the other thing that I'm always keen to emphasize is I think a lot of tech things get built for the sake of tech things being, kind of current. And that's not really the approach. It's really, we want Heba to be used when it's useful rather than because it's another thing that families have to fill in. So you can add as much or as little information as you want to there.
I think too, having it in your pocket, having it, we've all got our phones on us 24/7. And particularly in an emergency situation, if something happens with your child, and often with our medically complex children, this is reality, that you have to rush out the door to get to A&E, or you have to rush out the door to get to, some sort of doctor for a review, or it could even just be as simple as a pharmacist. And you don't think to grab that book all the time, or where did I put it after that last appointment, or whatever the case may be. If it's in your Heba app, it's on your phone, and that is on you at all times. So again, if it's not the first port of call, it's definitely there as a backup if you need it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the first things that came up when we were doing these kind of user sessions is you might not have your blue book on you or your folders. They might be at home, but you almost always have your phone on you these days. And so that important information, to be able to have that at your fingertips, that's really the idea behind it. Yeah.
How do you see that the app supports tube-fed children in particular in supporting that sort of collation of information?
Yeah, I think so. To take a step back and I guess explain a little bit about how the app works, there are a couple of key features. There is kind of a resource portal, which uses a kind of conversational AI in the way that you might see kind of ChatGPT and so on, but very much trained specifically on relevant information to this community. And it can link to kind of trusted resources and guidance. That's on one side of the app. It's about getting access to content and guidance and advice and signposting to services. We then have the Care Passport, which I touched on, which is this kind of easily shareable overview of important information. And then the third piece, the one that's probably most regularly engaged with, we call it the journal, but it's a way of keeping track of information, being able to see that, be able to understand it. And it's probably on those last two sections that I'll touch on to answer your question. So if you are meeting a professional for the first time, or maybe it could be a babysitter, or it could be a family friend who needs to understand a little bit about tube feeding as it relates to your child, whether that be the timings or the mechanics of how it's working, or any other kind of introductory information, what you can do is when your child meets them for the first time or is being dropped off, you can quickly export that PDF of the Care Passport. And you might quite likely have created a kind of custom section in the passport, which is on tube feeding, important things that you'd want somebody to know for the first time, the sorts of things that you might already have prepared a little paper overview that you share in advance, or the sorts of things you find yourself repeating every time you're explaining it. So what you can do is very quickly bring someone up to speed. That's the Care Passport side of things. But actually, as I mentioned, the area that's most regularly engaged with is this journal. So you can track all sorts of things in here. Most likely it would be feeds and I guess volumes and types of food. But what you can do is set up trackers so that there's a daily check-in notification or a multiple daily check-in notifications to say, okay, feeding's happened here. This was the volume. These were the comments related to it. You might want to take pictures or anything of the surrounding environment, because what you then might find is that a different person, whether it's a family member or a care assistant, might have been involved, or the child themselves, and you can add children to the profile at your discretion when they get to a certain age, might be logging information there as well. And then at the end of the day or at the end of the week, you can filter by feeds and you can see what was administered when any accompanying notes, positive or negative, media that's attached to it as well. And what you can then do is export all that information as well. You can export it kind of as a spreadsheet if you wanted to analyze it for whatever reason. We've got some families, for example, who need information exported for benefits that they're on. So you can evidence that these things are happening, and care assistants in the home are administering things. So that journal really lets you build up a record of feeds. But lots of other things can go in there as well. So you might be using that journal to keep track of medications, and we have medication reminders, or you can also add appointment notes. So maybe you've gone to see Dr. Smith and you need to make a note of what Dr. Smith has been recommending next. That goes in there and you can refer back to it, and you can tell your partner, check out the notes from Dr. Smith there. And again, these are often kind of preset things you might want to track, but we let you set up custom trackers as well, because every child is very different, and also every person's way of wanting to record information can be quite different. One mum kind of described it as a bit of a second brain for her child's care, something that, can be held onto and you might be too overwhelmed to remember it all, or whatever that might be. So hopefully, in a bit of a convoluted way, that gives a bit of a flavor of the sorts of features and how it might be able to support families. But because of that customization element, and because we started from this acknowledgement that even if two children have the same diagnosis, they're very different in any event. It's quite a flexible tool.
I would definitely agree with that. And, again, using the app myself and having a play around with it, I completely agree. Do you find that customization aspect is something that families use the most?
Yeah, we were talking about this, me and my co-founder the other day. We were looking at what are the trackers that are most regularly used and set up. Interestingly, I think the single most popular preset tracker is mood, and then it's nutrition and sleep. But actually the most popular tracker category is custom tracker. So even more popular than like mood as a pre-selected one is for a user to set up a custom tracker. And we don't have the granularity of kind of data to work out, okay, well, specifically what custom trackers, they're all different. But customization and that flexibility, I think clearly we can see in the way in which people interact with the app is something that's really important to them.
Again, when you've got a child that either doesn't have a diagnosis, may have multiple diagnoses, or they may have just very complex needs, if you can create something that's niche to your child, as well as use the preset information, you've got the best of both worlds.
Totally. And I think one of the other things that's been quite rewarding for us is, it was one of our first app reviews that was saying finally, something for us, and that's been built, that was built kind of by our community for our community. I suspect you probably hear similar feedback with what you're building with Beyond the Tube, but that's something that's quite rewarding, is to hear that people recognize that this is very much built for them rather than trying to kind of shoehorn an existing tool.
Absolutely. I also really like the idea that at some point, for me, Ezra's only 3, so he's got a long way to go until he can self-manage his care. But at some point, he will have to manage, and even if this all goes away and he doesn't need to be tube fed at some point, and he just carries on, life as any other, little boy without, or young man without diagnosis, he will still need to know his history and what happened and why these things happened. And he'll have this whole digital passport to be able to go, oh, here's everything. This is everything that I went through in my early life, or however long it goes on for. And I'm sure there's so many people who are thinking the same thing with their children whilst they're going through this. I also think it's it's almost like a keepsake. I know it sounds a bit strange, but this is the reality. This is our lives. This is what we live day to day, minute to minute. And sometimes you want to reflect on that and look at where you've been, where you've gotten to, and where you're going. And this app gives it to you in as fine a detail basically as you want it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. On the first point, we do, the goal would be that this could be something that could stay with somebody as long as they want, as they grow up. And we do actually have adult users. Of course, we haven't been around long enough that there's app users stuff, there's children, but some families use it as a kind of family health app. So they might track their child's information, but also maybe their husband has a condition that might benefit from that. And to your point, at the end of that, we actually see that parents will often track their own mood. That's another kind of tracker you can have. So how are you today as a mum? Take a minute to kind of reflect on that and see how that might change over time. And something that you can do in the app, we don't really emphasize, but we'd like to do more, is allow for families to reflect on, add information that would allow them to reflect on the day, or just record a goal or an achievement, or first day of school. Because you can add these pictures and videos when you log a journal entry, and then you can look back and go, oh, Junior had a brilliant day. Football went well, and here's a picture of him coming home, and that can kind of just slot in there in amongst any other reason why you might be using the app, because it can become that's why we call it a journal rather than kind of a medical log or anything. So you can use it for whatever might be appropriate to you. Because I think, again, one of the things that came through quite early on in my experience in this space, and then the conversations we have with families, is that a lot of the work you have to do might feel quite medicalized, but at the end of the day, this is your child who is a lovely person who probably loves their sports and their activities, and is far more interested in those than necessarily the mechanics of a medication they're taking or feeding, or whatever it might be.
What would you say to anyone who's watching or listening to our conversation around putting information into the app, but they may be a significant way through their journey? the idea of going back and putting information in may feel daunting to some people?
Yeah, we have a lot of users who mention that to us, and then we talk to them about that. I mean, some families, some users have said to us they get a lot of comfort from actually being able to retrospectively kind of put the important information in the app. Not all of it, but some families, when they first get on it, are like, oh, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to really fill this up, because now it's something that I can have in a single place in your pocket. The reality is the majority of users don't have time for that or an inclination, which is totally fine. So this is why I mentioned the way in which Heba has been designed is to kind of augment or complement the blue books and the paper folders that already exist. So there is no obligation for this to be the single source of truth that goes back all the way. What it's meant to be is something that means that the important information that you might need at any one time is at your fingertips. What you might do is set up your care passport, and it's just a one-page PDF that you can then export at your fingertips, maybe a kind of data diagnosis and a medication list, key contact details. And then you might be wanting to just use our journal to keep track of changes in mood over time and sleep, and then you can view trends and visualize those. So you might start using Heba for only that purpose. And as I mentioned, you can export all this information. So if you did then want to keep your single source of truth in a paper folder, you just export as a PDF, print the PDF, and then you can see visualizations over the 2 months you were tracking them, put them in your folder. So it's a very good point. We don't want to create more work for families. So there is no need for you to kind of retrospectively fill everything into the app. It's at the end of the day, the sorts of features that I've talked about now, whatever might appeal to you, if any, have a go with them, see if they help, and then use them alongside whatever it is you're using today, or slowly transition over.
What's next for Heba? What's coming up? You got any new updates coming out? Features coming?
What we're trying to do in the product is make it a much more intuitive and faster experience, by which I mean parents are busy, and so even an extra 2 taps to entering information can be a bit of a something that might put you off. So we want to find ways that you can really integrate keeping track of information in your day-to-day life as easy as possible. So things like voice recordings when you want to add information to the journal rather than needing to type it out each time. We also introduced this conversational interface I mentioned, which is kind of connected to some of these new tools in AI, large language models, and being able to not even use that to get access to information and resources, but actually interact with your own information. So you could type in, hey, log that there was great mood today after football, and then that'll go in your journal that way, rather than you needing to do it in quite a mechanical way. And what's exciting about that conversational interface is that you can then interact with your information really well. So if you're going to see your pediatrician next week and they've asked you to keep track of sleep diary and they want an update, rather than you needing to go through your journal and go, okay, sleep has gone like this, and by the way, my feeding has changed like this, and there's been a tough day at school, what you can do is ask this kind of chat feature, hey, provide a quick summary for my pediatrician next week, emphasize what's been going on with sleep, and it will generate a little paragraph overview of your information that you can then just share with that person, because it's tied in with your profile, which is really cool, because a lot of the time it is about remembering what did happen over the last month or the last 3 months, and it can be a bit of work for you to go through that. So if you speak to this kind of conversational interface and ask it questions, it'll pull that information in a conversational style for you. So lots of cool stuff on the product that's really about making it just feel natural and quick. And I think I touched on it earlier, but outside of the product, I think what we're really keen to do is just make sure that it's introduced to families at the time that is most useful to them. Today, mostly families will hear about Heba through kind of word of mouth or on social media. And that's great, but it then requires them to address what you just asked, which is, okay, well, I'm maybe a certain number of years into this journey, and it would be a bit of work for me to basically get used to this way of working. So by partnering with charities and healthcare organizations who at the point of a diagnosis or maybe on a wait list or whenever it might be can say, hey, you're about to start needing to keep track of this information, or you might find that this all can be quite overwhelming. There are some tools out there. Heba is one of those, and why don't you try it out and see if it's useful for you? So yeah, that's a long way of saying kind of partnering with organizations to help get it in front of families.
I love that. And I love the upcoming changes or improvements, enhancements that are coming on the app. That's I can picture using it. It's like talking to it and saying, give me this information for my pediatrician appointment or my specialist appointment or what have you, and being able to get that, quick summary of what's happened. Would just be, would change my life. Like it would be so good.
It'd be brilliant if we can get that right. And I think one of the other things we hear is it's not just necessarily for clinicians, but there's a lot of, certainly in the UK, a lot of, for want of a better word, admin related to making sure that you have the funding and the benefits entitled. I know you have the NDIS in Australia.
Yes.
In the UK, for example, you'll have to kind of evidence needs and write up kind of information related to those needs. And again, this can be used for that. It can say, hey, I need you to provide a first draft to evidence the tube feeding needs or whatever it might be, and it can provide that based on your information. But I would also say, in terms of what's next, that we really try our best to be user-led. So yourself or anyone listening who's tried out Heba or wants to try it out, if you ever wrote in to us and said, this is what needs to come next, like we look and respond to each and every one of those.
That's amazing. And I think that shows in the success of the app, because it feels like it's been created, and it has been, by someone who understands what it's like to have to collate all this information and share this information and continuously update information, even if it's just as simple as medication.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, we spent the best part of a year just kind of designing it and working with groups around the UK and abroad. And I really want to make sure that that's something that we try and keep at the forefront.
Wonderful. I really hope New South Wales Health will jump on board and start recommending this to people as they begin their journey, because I can sit here thinking when Ezra very first went into hospital at 1 year old and all this information was thrown at us, if this had have been suggested to us at the time, it would have been life-changing, just because there was so much to learn already. Having a centralized place to record it and brain dump and all of those things when you're going through it would just be huge.
Yeah, and I think just to try and provide families with something that can provide some peace of mind, or something that just decreases a little bit of maybe the overwhelm or the stress that's coming in. I would be the last person to describe Heba as like a solution, because in tech, when we surround, like, we're in an office in East London full of other kind of tech companies, and they're always sort of like, what's your solution? What's the problem? What's the solution? Heba's not a solution, but it's trying to be like a helping hand to help put people in control. And so any way in which it can add a degree of control or support to families, we really want to make sure it can do that as much as it can.
Where did the name Heba come from?
Oh, it's a long story. So we originally were called Hebi, Hibi. There's a Greek goddess of youth that was a reference to, and we then encountered a trademark issue with an antiseptic scrub called Hibi Scrub, which meant that we changed our name slightly. We kind of did a poll to our audience and said, should we do a completely different name change, or should we go for something quite similar but clearly distinct from the issue we had? So yeah, it's a bit of a convoluted story. Started with the best intentions to be a reference to a goddess of youth, but ended up changing to Heba for reasons out of our control. But I think what we wanted is something that was a bit unique. Even though there's pronunciations issues because we get called Heba sometimes, it's mainly so if somebody tells you about what we're building, you can Google it and you'll find it, rather than if we were called like Care Circle or something, it's going to be hard to find that. But that was the origin story.
I have mentioned it to a few people, and they're like, Heba? What's Heba? And it instantly engages people. Like, what is that? Tell me more about it. So I think it's quite smart.
Don't get me wrong, we've also had a lot of people who said, like, what on earth is that name? It doesn't mean anything, which is fair, but it's a bit of a trade-off to make sure it's recognizable, it's unique, and then hopefully a bit memorable as well.
Just to wrap up, how do people access Heba? Where do they get it from? I assume just app stores, but, let people know where they can access it. I also would love to point out that for those in Australia who are connected through NDIS, that the app is funded under assisted technology.
Yeah, and I should say as well, there is a fully free version of the app as well with the kind of core features. But in order that we can keep the lights on and invest in our product, there is a Heba Plus. And yes, under NDIS, to my understanding, that's something that can be reimbursed there. You have it available on Apple and Google app stores. So you can check out the reviews that people are leaving. I think in Australia, you would see Australian reviews only, but we've had well over 200 reviews now around the world from families, and really pleased to see it averages like 4.9 stars, which is great. Check out the app stores. Our website is heba.care, and then email us on hello@heba.care.
Amazing. Thank you, Sam, so much for your knowledge, for creating this app, and just being an advocate for this community, because we don't have enough, and people like yourself are making a huge difference. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, that's really kind of you, and like absolutely back to yourself as well with Beyond the Tube, and for facilitating the conversation. That means that I can share a bit about what we're doing with others. But no, that's really kind of you. Thank you.
A big thank you once again to Tubi Fun for their sponsorship of today's episode. Please head over to their Instagram page and check out their wonderful products. Alternatively, you can jump onto their website. Their link is in our show notes. Without the sponsorship of companies like Tubi Fun, this podcast isn't possible. So thank you again, Tubi Fun.